Welcome, Warriors, to another episode of the Warrior 3 podcast. On this episode, super pumped. Got my good friend, Alan Smith, former Division I tailback for Brown University, now turned pastor. Super excited about it. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. Go to warrior3project.com. Get involved in our community. Enjoy the episode. So this episode, I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about, how does our physical health impact our spiritual health? Alan, just thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's just I've got a chance to know you a little bit more over the last year, and I'm just super excited for what God's doing in your life. And so, before we did this episode, I was like, you're a pastor. We both, super excited about fitness. And we have a common, I guess, goal, which is we want to try to make the church healthier.
Yeah.
Not just, spiritually, which is the foundation, as 1 Timothy says, but like we've got a physical health problem.
Yeah.
You're a fit guy. You're a personal trainer. It's a great ministry.
Yeah.
And we've kind of lived that together. But I just hey, tell the audience, hey, who are you? Where'd you come from? Kind of a little bit of your story. Like, how did you get into fitness, and why is that important to you?
Yeah, totally. Again, thanks for having me. Excited to do this, and very grateful because, as you obviously alluded to, and we're going to talk at length today about how important physical health is to the spiritual health, mental health, everything else. And so you've helped me on that journey to become healthier overall, because I like to, and kind of right now zooming in, like, you cannot separate spiritual health, physical health, mental health. Like, it's just, it's impossible. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to focus on this, not have this. They're all part of it. I like to say, be a total human. So to be a total human is to have all of that. And so that kind of launches a little bit into kind of like how I got into this, and so I grew up here in Columbus, and was always an athlete. That was first and foremost. Called myself a Christian, but I was not living for Jesus by any means until college, when I came to know Christ, and then everything switched. So I was taking care of my physical health, even I'd say the mental health at some, but it wasn't until I kind of, I'd say, unlocked, or God called me. I came to know Christ in college when I started to become we use the language, this is why I love Total Human, being a total athlete. It's that spiritual, physical, and mental. So I fell in love with that. It changed my life. Mm-hmm. It literally saved me, right? Like salvation saved me. And so what I fell in love with was like, hey, everything I do, whether I'm an athlete, whether I do things in schoolwork, went to Brown, high level education. So that was always important. But it was like I became a total human, and everything I did was for God, for an audience of one, meaning like I saw everything as an opportunity that was a gift. Because I think there's a switch coming to know Christ. There's a level of humility to understand, like, wow, this isn't about me. It's about God. It's about Him. And so that's with my physical, that's with my spiritual, that's with my relationships, that's with my football, that's with, kind of what I do now. So I lead youth at a church, and I do personal training. I coach athletes, disciple guys, and that's what I love to do. And so, I kind of, got into it. I had no means or plans for ministry ever. That was never an aspiration of my life.
It's funny how that works.
Isn't it? God just like here, and then like, I'm going to put you over here.
Yeah.
And so, I'd never had any aspiration. I knew I wanted to be an NFL player. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so, but when God captured my heart, it was like, all right, I'm going to go pursue this football thing. So I was, training for the NFL, got a couple of tryouts with teams, and then I didn't get signed. And I'm like, God, like, what do I do? What next? Because I knew I was still going to try to play. Got positive feedback, like, hey, keep training. Mm-hmm. And so I got home, and after not getting signed with the Titans, broken, I'm like, God, what do I do? And my former trainer, he called me, and he was like, hey, we need a coach to coach athletes, sports performance, strength and conditioning. Do you want to come coach? And I was like, yeah, why not? So I started coaching. That was June of 2023, so about a year and a half ago now. So I got into coaching, and I had a personal trainer, Chuck Gresham. He was great, training me as an athlete, amazing. And I always fell in love with it. And I was with him for like 12 years. So picked up a few things over the years. And so I just always was in love with like form, even lifting. Like, how can I improve my physical health? And so that's how I got into it. Started coaching, started doing personal training, getting some clients. You know, I've gotten to train like some karate people too and stuff. And so it's been exciting getting into that. And I'm like, this is such a big opportunity to be able to care for, again, the total human. Like, in the same way I was an athlete, it was like, hey, take care of the body, take care of the soul, take care of the mental health. And it's become just a burden and a passion of mine. It's like, first and foremost, like, I want to lead people closer to Jesus, closer to God, and I want to positively impact their lives. But it cannot be separated from that physical side of it, which I believe God gave me an aspiration for, a gift, a calling, a reach. Actually yesterday morning, I was with a couple of my clients, and in the middle of the workout, he's like, hey, Alan, could you like explain like the parable of the prodigal son from the older brother's perspective? So it's just like, I'm in this training, right? Like coaching him how to do a bench press. And he's like, yeah, so what about this like whole Jesus's grace, God's grace thing? So it's a means, right? So it's just like, hey, caring for that physical health right there. Now, okay, now we're in the soul and in that mental too. And so, yeah, that's kind of a little bit of my passion, my burden, and, kind of why I just got into it. It was really just God planted, placed, gave opportunities and gifts. So
it's good, man. You know, we'll talk about a little bit more like as we, get into the show.
Yeah.
I love to use physical stuff, especially with men, to open them up. I mean, you've been a part of the, Warrior 3, the WOD and the Word that we do. Like, there's a reason why it is that we work out and we do physically hard things to break down the, chip away the ego per se. And it's amazing what happens whenever you open that. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But, it's all fine and good, right? We're super passionate about health, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Like, we're strong Christians, so it's not like, hey, we're out here, trying to be like uber super fit. Like for us, like there's a reason why it is that we are training our physical bodies.
That's good.
God does not say, hey, let's just ignore our physical bodies and focus. He's like, hey, physical health is of importance in 1 Timothy, but the foundation is Jesus. I think that people get it very backwards. Like, you've got two different types of men. You've got, the men that are, hey, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I'm on 4 different medications, and I'm going to get a brand new body in heaven, right? So give me the Krispy Kremes, right?
Yeah, you hear that?
No, I mean, it's a lot of people. And then you've got, the guy that is constantly looking at himself in the mirror at LA Fitness. That is just posing, and it's a very kind of like self. I got to get myself to a point, because if I just build some physical muscle, then I can win my way through this life. And I'll be honest with you, I was there, as an athlete and somebody that was striving to be the best. I was chasing after perishable crowns. And so I love how, you use fitness and training not as like the end all, but at the same time, it is a great way to open people up. So, here's the big question that I want to start with. Like, as a pastor, as somebody that you're in ministry,
aspiring pastor.
You're in the you didn't go to seminary school, right? But at the same time, like, you are very gifted in what you're doing and how you're leading people, and you're in the church, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think? Because what you're saying right now and what I'm saying is truth, and scientifically, I can tell you how poor physical health can affect you emotionally. It's all over the place. That's all fine and good, but that's not what's happening inside the church, right? Like, why do you think that physical health and spiritual health are being separated? Like, what is the great divide there? Because I'm just, Craig Rochelle, right? I mean, Life Church. I mean, one of the largest churches in the world. He wrote a book called, Winning the War in Your Mind.
Yeah.
And the dude is
on my reading list.
Right? I mean, I've read the book like 3 times, right? The dude's jacked. He talks about how he works out all the time.
Yeah.
In order to be able to do what he wants to do. But I've never heard him preach a sermon on physical health. Right?
Yeah.
Stephen Furtick, right? He's got what he calls the pain cave, like where he has guys come over to his house, and Craig Rochelle, they work out, and they're like, that's where some of our best ideas come from. But I've never heard Stephen Furtick ever preach a message about physical health.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think
it's a hard question.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
I'm coming out hot.
Yeah, chewing on this one a little bit. And I want to say my immediate answer is pride.
Okay.
And that's twofold.
Okay.
In the positive sense and the negative sense. So we'll take it into the positive sense. You mentioned the guy that's always checking himself out in the mirror. He's getting his validation from his physical.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got maybe the guy that's like so prideful, like, hey, look at me, I'm good. Okay. And then maybe the other side is the negative side, is like someone that's not taking care of the body by any means. They don't see it as a gift. So our bodies are a gift, right? And so, in 1 Corinthians 6, great verse, like 19 and 20, I think it's like, don't you know that your body is a temple for the Holy Spirit? So if you're a Christian, you're a follower of Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit within you. How do you take care of that temple for the Holy Spirit to dwell in? So maybe it's the pride of like, hey, I'm getting my validation from this, or it's the pride of I'm not humbling myself to recognize that this body is a gift.
Yeah,
it's a gift both times.
It's on loan. It's like I always use the example of like it's like almost like your body is like a car that you've leased.
Yeah,
right? Like you leased a car, right? I don't lease cars, but I just know that when you lease a car, you better not bring it back crappy,
right?
Otherwise, you get punished for that.
Yeah.
So that's like an analogy that I like to use with individuals. It's like, listen, like you give your life to Christ, like you're going to go to heaven. I'm not saying that God's going to, send a lightning bolt down if you have a Krispy Kreme, right?
Right.
Or he's got a magnifying lens on every time you go to Chick-fil-A.
Right.
It just like we've completely ignored the fact that those two things exist. So
yeah. I think that's a great analogy. And so it's just like, you hear like, okay, and maybe you kind of mentioned a couple of those guys, and maybe it's the leading by example. Mm-hmm. Right? So, maybe they're not preaching sermons on health.
Sure.
But they lead by example and saying, hey.
That's a good point.
And I think it says a lot. How one takes care of himself is going to be reflective of how he takes care of others. Mm-hmm. And we talk about a pastor, right, whose job is to take care of the flock, right? Mm-hmm. The Bible calls it being a shepherd. Mm-hmm. And me as an aspiring shepherd, pastor, Lord willing, that's the plan one day, is to be shepherding and leading and caring for the flock. So if I say, hey, he sees Alan, he's taking care of himself. Oh, he's probably going to take a lot of detail and intensive care to take care of me. So I think that's probably maybe why you see that. Like, oh, that matters. And he's going to take care of his whole body, sees it as his gift, sees the humility and understanding of what he's been gifted and what is, like you said, least. And then it shows by example how details matter, how physical health matters, how spiritual health matters, and mental health matters.
It's good, only because I never really thought of it that way, because I get frustrated because I'm so passionate about, the church, number one, and people not dying short of their God-given potential for something that they could have prevented.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that just, like, dude, you want to, like, just get me really frustrated and fired up.
Mm-hmm.
You see a really strong biblical spiritual giant in our community, die of cancer or something early. And for someone to say, well, it was his time. And I'm like, I don't know if it was his time.
Yeah.
I would say that there's probably a lot of things that he was doing, in that process and so it's a big thing to me. But I do love how you pointed out, because I love Craig Rochelle. I listen to Stephen Furtick, so I'm not like, isolating those guys, but maybe it is. It's more of I don't need to preach something from the stage, but I can live that out, because ultimately true leadership is I've got to be walking the walk, not necessarily talking the talk.
Yeah.
And we talk quite a bit in this world. So
my pastor always says, you can't lead people to places you haven't been.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like, if you haven't been there, then you can't lead people to somewhere. So
it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. So I'm going to dive into this article real quick. So, I talked to you earlier about it, like Rick Warren. So those of you guys who know Rick Warren, pastor of Saddleback Church, and he wrote the book Purpose Driven Life.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the New York Times bestseller. And this always this particular article, or this life-changing thing that Rick went through, he actually did an article in 2020, and it kind of breaks down some of these biblical verses when it comes to food and diet and exercise and so forth. But anyway, to kind of paint the picture for you, he basically, they're baptizing like over 300 people at their church one weekend, and he said after the weekend, I just noticed how heavy and how overweight and how unhealthy physically people were.
Yeah.
And not to take anything away from the fact that we had just baptized them and, basically a public declaration that Jesus Christ is their Lord.
Yeah.
So we're taking, but like we've got a problem. And he also said, I am a big problem. He goes, I'm tired. I'm overweight. My blood, I don't sleep. And he goes, just like you said, I'm not being a good shepherd over my flock because a flock will only follow a shepherd at which they can follow and is leading by example. So anyway, they ended up doing a massive health kind of revival in the church. They brought all these individuals in and literally thousands and thousands of pounds were lost. People were off medication.
Wow.
And I think it just, anyway, he basically said, for every excuse we can come up with to ignore our physical health, there are other pressing reasons to consider. He says this: our longevity in ministry can be cut short because of poor health. Right? I'll just, that's a big topic. I mean, how many pastors do you see, or how many people that you see get burnout?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, not just pastors, but chiropractors, doctors. So much pressure that we put on ourselves to be the light to people.
Right.
And if we're not taking care of ourselves, or we're not resting, it's a problem. Our sharpness of mind is affected by what we eat and our activity level. We challenge others to live healthy lives, so we should set the example. Our physical energy level rises to the demands of ministry if we're in shape. Our bodies are temples too, created by the master craftsman and placed under our stewardship. And so, our longevity. As a aspiring pastor, I mean, one of these days you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, like all these different things. Like, health is not something that we do just because we want 6-pack abs, even though I think it's great. I mean, it's great to have 6-pack abs, but at the same time, it's not why we're doing what we're doing.
Right.
If that makes sense. The first thing that he talks about here, and then we can kind of go back and forth, but food, right? We went to church this weekend, and I love my church, right? So I love my church. I love the people in it. It's just great. But my kids eat different, they just do, and I grew up in a chiropractic family, and, and it's not even chiropractic. Right? So first off, like, this was like, well, you're a chiropractor, you're weird. Like, that's not why, you don't give your kids this stuff. Like, it's like, no, like, that's not because of chiropractic. That's because it doesn't make sense to me physiologically. It doesn't line up to what this says, right? So this weekend, my church had Cheryl's cookies, in the lobby. Yeah. And so my middle
cookies though.
I've never had a Cheryl's cookie.
Really?
I've never. The only time I've had experience with Cheryl's cookies is Westerville North's athletic banquet. So I would donate and buy a ton of Cheryl's cookies for the wrestling program at Westerville North, and then I would give them to the wrestlers and not take them home. Anyway, my sons were like, "Hey, Dad, those cookies are the bad ones that we can't have," right? And anyway, it just kind of like, it set this up that I feel like sometimes church can be, hey, in order to get kids to youth night, we're going to have tons of pizza and pop, and in order to be able to celebrate and get people excited, we're going to have all these different types of things.
Right.
It would be really weird for someone to say, hey, you know what? Hey, after church, we got this awesome salad bar out there, or hey, youth night, we're going to have bananas and oranges. I can't wait to see you at youth night. So I get that.
Right.
But this is what it says. So 1 Thessalonians 4:4, each of you should learn to control his own body in a way that is holy and honorable.
Yeah.
He's like, obviously, there are a lot of different things that go on medically, but at the same time, we should be able to control what we put into our mouth. And I feel like a lot of people have a lot of food addictions. Like, people are addicted to sugar. People are addicted to complex carbohydrates, just like you would be addicted to alcohol or cocaine or whatever. But we don't look at it like that in the church. It's like, dude, buffet, eat as much as you want, but you better not have a beer because that's bad.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think a couple of different things I'm thinking about. You mentioned stewardship earlier.
Sure.
So to place under control, you mentioned in that article, how do we steward what's been given to us? That's everything in our lives. That's, that's your job, that's your career, that's your finances, that's your physical body, that's your family, that's your wife, that's your kids. So how do you steward those things? And we are tasked with stewarding them well, including your body. Another thing you brought up was that 1 Thessalonians. Wow, I can't say it either. First Thessalonians verse, right before that, he says, "For this is the will of God, your sanctification." And he talks about sexual morality in there, talks about our bodies, and then so he says, "Hey, this is the will of God, that you be made more holy, to be sanctified, that you be made more holy." And then another thing that came up too, which is, and I'm tying all these things together: stewardship, being made more holy, and then the other part is. The Bible talks about how don't let things master you.
Yeah.
You mentioned addiction. If food is mastering my life, right? The sin of gluttony, right? So if things are mastering my life, I am not stewarding and I'm not being sanctified because something else has control over me, as opposed to me surrendering to God and letting Him guide and lead. So I think it's that stewardship, it's that sanctification, being made more holy, and it's that addiction part of it. And so I think it's, you mentioned in the church, right? It's like, I think a lot of times, like, how many sermons do you hear about gluttony?
None.
Right?
Never.
So so I think it's something that we kind of maybe ignore, we pass over. And I think, again, it probably comes into that. I think that, and I have a theory that kind of the basis of stem of all sin, all things that we don't steward or take care of or miss the mark on, is because of pride, because we know better than God.
Sure.
And so I think it's a poor handling of how we steward everything. And so, like, hey, take it in the church. You mentioned, like, how can we create better health with that? And so I think it's seeing that as a gift, as a responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think I think your spiritual health is blocked by if you have a poor physical health. Like, if I can't get out of bed in the morning, if I'm in and out of the hospital sick, I cannot live as powerfully as I can for Jesus.
Sure.
Because I'm in and out. So it's like, how do we promote this culture of health where, hey, we see everything as the gift, and that we need to be healthy followers of Jesus for that purpose, so we can steward well and glorify God as best as we can.
Yeah, it's all about the why.
Yeah.
You got to ask yourself the question, like, why is it important for me to eat more vegetables and meat than it is for me to have, fast food?
Right.
If you're like, well, if you can't answer that question, and it has anything to do with you physically, and less about what you're trying to get accomplished for God, right? Because that's the question I always ask myself, and I always tell my boys.
Yeah.
I say, listen, having McDonald's every once in a while is not going to kill you, son.
Right.
And I would honestly tell you, as a father, if you don't let your boys or let your kids make decisions and fall on their face, and you hoard them and you keep them away from stuff like that, then they're just going to do it outside of your house.
Yeah.
So, but they understand why. It's like, listen, your body's a temple, and so in order to be able to do the things that we want to get accomplished, this is why we choose this.
Right.
But I feel like we're not really having that conversation, and I also think that sometimes, especially Christian men, that we've had to be so perfect. Yeah. Pastors, the church, we've had to be so perfect. Like, there's so much pressure on us as men. Yeah. We've got to make sure that we lead our house well. We've got to make sure that we're stewarding and providing for our home.
Yep.
We've got to be like, if you're a pastor of a church, like, there's so much pressure to make sure that people are, their appetites are being filled, right? There's just so much pressure, and so we've always kind of given a pass on food and other things like that,
right? Because
our marriage has to be perfect. Yeah, like we can't do anything on the outside, but yet, hey, let's go grab some lunch and we'll, you just live at the buffet. Yeah, so I love the whole balance of, hey, your body's a temple, and we have to control that. Yeah, just like we have to control. If you have a control problem with alcohol, then you probably shouldn't be drinking alcohol. Right. Right. I would also say that, some people make fitness an idol, right? And some people are like, well, I cannot go a week without working out, otherwise I feel so beat down. Then fitness has become an idol for you, right? Yeah. And so we're talking about bad food, but we can also put it on the good things like fitness that we're talking about. It can be an idol too.
Right.
And I haven't opened up my Bible in 2 weeks, but yet I'm looking at men's fitness magazines, and I'm so that can be that too.
Yeah, totally.
It says here, 1 Corinthians 6:12 through 13, everything is permissible for me, but I will not be mastered by anything.
Yeah,
right.
there you go.
Food is for the stomach, and stomach for food, but God will eventually destroy them both. Right. So the big thing here is don't be mastered by anything.
Right.
It's like live in balance. And I guess I'll get your thoughts on that, because you ever hear people say, well, like life, if you're really on fire, then balance is a myth. You ever heard that?
I've not heard that.
Really?
No.
Wow. I hear that a lot. And
like on fire for Jesus?
No, I'm talking about just in life. Like it's like if you're on, like I've even heard Craig Rochelle and just some bigger pastors say, hey, balance doesn't exist. Balance doesn't exist whenever God has you on a mission. And I start to think, well, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because some people say, well, balance isn't good. Like if you're all in or you're all out. And I would say, well, that's where people end up having things underneath the hood, right? Hey, I'm building this church, or I've got this company, and I've got all this money, but behind the scenes I'm an alcoholic, or I start doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And so I just love this verse, because it says, don't be mastered by anything, but really it's about balance in your diet. It's about balance in your fitness. It's about balance in your home, and so forth. So anything you want to add on that?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was about to ask you, like, how do we balance these things? And so we know, as Christians, like Jesus has to be first and foremost, right? And I was speaking to a high school basketball team yesterday, and one of the kids, he comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, like, Alan, how can I?" And this is the example I use. How can I feel like there's a silver lining of like on this fence where it's like here's the fence, and here's like my passions, meaning like football, he's a basketball player, football, basketball, things, fitness, good things, right? And then like following Jesus, like submitting over here. And just like I feel like oftentimes I find myself on the fence. So he actually asked me, he's like, how do I balance all of these things? It's just like, and what I told him, and I was like, okay, I don't think maybe you think about either side of the fence. I think it's like up here, like grand scoping, overarching everything is following Jesus first and foremost, in anything and everything. And then your passions, your desires, they all fit in this, right? It's like your job, your career, your family, your finances, everything that you like, and I think those are gifts from God. Like you have a gift from God as an aspiration to be a chiropractor, to care for health, to care for men. That's why we're actually sitting here right now, is because we love making men better, right? To live, lead, and love strong, right? That's what the Warrior 3, it's like, you love doing that. And I love to see that. And so the question is like, how can we keep God first and foremost, and then in all of these things be in balance with that being number one? And so how do you balance that? I think I'm still trying to figure that out. And I think maybe that's what we're trying to figure out for the rest of our lives. Is how do I balance? Because I think there is a healthy level of like stabilization. Maybe that's a better word. Stabilization. Because I think maybe, things change, external circumstances. So, maybe there's never a perfect balance, because what's here tomorrow, that balance isn't going to work anymore because, your mom calls and she's sick or whatever, right? So, the balance that I had yesterday is not applicable today. But how do I be stabilized? And we know, of course, that rock is Jesus. But then it's like, how do I stay stabilized in these other things so that I can live maybe the most healthy and fruitful life?
No, I think that's the question that or maybe what it is that I'm trying to instill in men is that you can live, lead, and love strong in all of those areas. And at the end of your life, at 100 years old, look at your wife, wrinkly, just watching your grandkids play, and just look back and think, man, we did it well. It is possible. It's possible to, go through this life and to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish, still have a good physical health. Your kids want to hang out with you. Your grandkids want to hang out with you. You know, they want to come over to your house for Thanksgiving still when you're
Right.
80.
Yeah.
You know, they're still at your great grandsons are still asking you for advice. I think it's possible, and it comes down to balance between those things. But I think what I would say to that is that in your live, Christ has to be the center of that.
Mm-hmm.
Christ has to be the center of your lead, and Christ has to be the center of your love.
That's good.
Right. So I don't know if I would necessarily say that because it is. Christ is the foundation.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing everything. But I think you have to take a step back and say, because I think this is where people miss it. Why am I exercising and doing what I'm doing to my physical body?
Yeah.
It's to be a better steward, so that way I can live out what God has called me to do.
Yeah.
Like that's why I'm doing burpees and all these.
Right.
That's why I'm getting in an ice bath. Like that's why I'm getting adjusted. That's why I'm stewarding over the body. But those are good. Like those are building the body up. Those are strengthening it.
Yeah.
Are the things that I'm doing and how I live weakening it? Am I just throwing a pill at everything that I do? Am I just sleeping in all the time? Am I eating? Hey, the heck with it. I'm never going to be able to get better. So that's. If that's your mindset, then I would argue that Christ is in the center of how you live.
That's great. Yeah.
And that's kind of where I get a little bit frustrated with some of the churches because it's like, hey, I love Jesus, but I'm on 10 different medications and I'm not asking why. Right. So Christ has to be the center of that. Christ has to be the center of your leadership.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm a business owner. I have to steward over my employees' finances. I have to steward over their well-being. They're a part of my family.
Yeah.
If I'm just barking orders at the top, kind of like Trump Tower, it's just like boom. It's like, hey, I do what I do.
Yeah.
Do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most horrible things you could ever tell anybody.
Yeah.
Hey, do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm not living this out, but I'm your boss, and I will. So Christ has to be the center of your leadership, and then Christ has to be the center of your loving strong in your home. It's Christ is the foundation, but he has to be the center of everything that you're doing in those three things. And I think if he is, that's how we begin to create balance. And you said stabilization because people will say all the time, well, how do I do that? Like, how do I do that from a long term? Because anybody can go on Warrior 3 Project and do a 40-day challenge, get jacked, and then 2 months later get a divorce.
Right.
I mean, it happens all the time. It's about stabilization and consistency over the course of time. I think guys, come out of the gate hot.
Yeah.
I've done, challenges in churches where people, lose 30 pounds. Then all of a sudden I see them 6 months later and it's all back.
Right.
Right. So it's really about the whole little leaven leavens the whole lump kind of a concept.
Yeah.
It's little things over the course of time. So we're talking about diet. Well, if your diet is nothing but pizza and beer, I'm not asking you to just throw it all away.
Right.
Like you've got to put certain things into your life and make slow, steady changes so you can become more stable.
There you go.
And therefore, if you're more stable, then you become more balanced.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's a great word. And I'll ask the question, how many times did you fail in trying to create balance before, obviously I've not perfected this, but you've lived this out well. And I see that. And I think it's evident. You kind of mentioned if Christ is the center of everything else, it shows in the fruit. Like what you do with your life shows how much you value and what's at the center. Yeah. And so how many times, or if there's a time period or kind of like routine, like how many times did you have to show up to be consistent even when it didn't make sense? Even we live in an instant gratification world, right? We're expecting to see results,
especially from a physical standpoint.
Especially from we see all on Instagram. I go on there, I can see the most jacked people ever, and they're like, "Hey, do these 4 hacks so that you can get jacked." But what they don't maybe always tell is like, I showed up for 8 years and failed for 4 of them before I got there. So kind of what is the level of how do I stay consistent? How many times, maybe if you had an example in your life, did you have to fail or just show up when you did not want to, just to be able to get to that level of balance or stabilization?
So great question. I failed a lot. I failed last night. Like my wife and I were, you talk about balance, right?
Yeah.
You talk about self-control. I got 4 kids at home and it's like a WWE wrestling match in my house, and there's always a kid left unaccounted for. we're on the couch last night ordering stuff online, bickering back and forth, and I had one too many glasses of bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I had to wake up this morning and get on and do a podcast with you.
Yeah,
like I failed last night. Like I, you know, as somebody who is talking about balance and self-control and health, like everybody falls short of the glory of God.
Yeah,
like I mean, to put that kind of pressure of perfection is where you paralyze yourself. And so, to answer your question, the reason why I'm consistent in my fitness, the reason why I get up every morning and I decide to read this, the reason why it is that I continually choose to love my wife, is
even when you don't want to,
even when I don't want to. Like, and I'll even say we have this thing in our house where I say, listen, I would rather fight with you than make love to anybody else, and that's a real thing. But you know, you just got to wake up every single day, and you have to know why you're doing what you're doing. And I keep going back to that because the what is great, the how is great, and everybody wants the what and the how. But the why is what drives me to come here and do a podcast like this when I really just wanted to sleep in. You know, and I got a workout in. I did my thing. The workout wasn't as great as what I'd liked it to be, but I moved. You know, and it's because I know where God wants me to be. I know where God has called me to be. And if you don't have that real solid why in your life, then you're going to take shortcuts. You're going to not follow a consistent dietary program. You're not going to have a consistent workout regimen. You're going to be all over the place in this thing. Right. And you're only going to go to the places that make you feel good about yourself, and you're going to skip over the things that challenge you. You're also going to, you know, you're going to do things behind the scenes in relationships. And you're going to be a false a hypocrite, you know, in those ways. So, you know, I don't know if I answered the question of how you do that, but I think the big thing for me is that I just have to anchor to why. I have to anchor to, hey, yesterday wasn't a good day. I did this. So what? Move on. You know, it's like wrestling. So I wrestled in college, and I think life is very similar to a wrestling match. It's like if someone takes you down, you can't sit there on the mat and whine and cry like a little baby. Like you've got to get back up to your feet, and you've got to hand fight, and you've got to attack. And life is like that. Life is going to take you down. Life is going to slam you on your face. You have to know who it is that you serve, and you have to know that God has a plan for your life. And regardless if you're fat or skinny or jacked, God still loves you. You know, and whether or not you had one more glass of bourbon than what you should, and maybe your wife is just not happy with you right now. Like God still has a plan and loves you. And His grace is sufficient every single day. So, you know, that's for me. It's, you know, that's why I can be consistent, because I know who I serve. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, these types of things, like when I know, hey, my body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and there will be consequences for those who desecrate the temple. When I think about that, I'm like, I don't really have a choice. Like, you know, like I can't, it's kind of a line in the sand. Like I don't have a choice. I can't be a turd of a dad. Like I can't be fat and overweight in what I do. Like, I mean, imagine that. A chiropractor, a leader of men sitting here 100 pounds overweight on 4 different meds telling you how to be healthy. Like I don't have that choice. God didn't choose me to be somebody who could get away with that. And so when I think about that, I'm like, dude, if you don't get up in the morning, if you don't do a good job of leading your boys today, there are a lot of people that are going to be let down because of that. And maybe that's pressure, or maybe that's just God saying, hey, it's okay. You don't always have to win today, but just make sure that you're moving in the right direction. So anyway.
No, I think I think that was a great answer. And maybe if I could highlight, like, you can, in a few sentences, what you said. You talked about the beauty of God's grace. Like, and how.
And I personally struggle with that, by the way.
I think we all do.
Just as a dude and as somebody who's striving to be fitness and fit and eat good, and like I beat myself up this morning for, you know, like being up until 11, and we had a great time. My wife had a great time. We were laughing, you know, like, you know, ordering Christmas presents online. We look, it's like 11:30, and I've had, you know, 3 glasses of bourbon. I'm like, holy, whoa. And I woke up this morning, I was like, dude, what's going on? And I was like, beat myself up. You know, I was like, dude, like, that is not what a warrior man, Christian dad does. And so I struggle with that. But that's what I have to remind myself of
Yeah.
that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
but
no,
I just want people to know that, like, as the founder of Warrior 3, I'm not a perfect,
right.
and I don't want to be led by a perfect person. Personally.
Yeah.
I want to be led by that person who's scarred up
Mm-hmm.
and has got calluses all over their hands. I don't need a dude trying to lead me that has manicured hands.
Right. Right. Yeah, no,
So-
that's great. And I think we struggle with the fact of, like, especially, we're driven men, we want to be great. And so when we see that we mess up, we see ourselves as failure. And it's in those times, and I'll highlight the other thing that you said was, you talk about being a meek man, right?
Sure.
The Bible talks about being a meek man, being humble and choosing to die. You choose to die to yourself, to love your wife even when you're mad at her. That is a humbling thing to do, and it's really hard. And that's the mark, I would say, of a warrior man. To die to self, humble myself before Christ, the why, right? And understand, like, hey, I've messed up, but the beauty of God's grace is, wow, he forgives me even then. Because I can't earn favor with God. I can't earn my salvation. It's a humbling. So it's almost the opposite. It's like choosing to die, choosing to surrender, choosing to love, choosing to live, choosing to lead, and recognizing the grace. And I oftentimes struggle. Like, I'll sin and be like, man, beat myself up. Like, no, I need to humble myself before God and say, God, forgive me. Like, I already know he's forgiven me and help me. Paul talks about, like, hey, he says, or Jesus at the well with the woman, right? He says, hey, your sins are forgiven, and go and sin no more.
Yeah.
So it's like, recognize that, hey, I messed up, but Jesus is like, you're forgiven, go and sin no more. And so it's kind of like those scars.
Go be better, yeah.
Those, calluses, we get beat up and we strive in recognizing that God's grace is sufficient in the decision to be humble, choose to die to yourself every day. One of my favorite theologians, Pastor John Piper, he says he gets on his knees before every morning that he wakes up, and he says, God, I pray that John Piper would die today so that Jesus Christ can live. Galatians, I was listening to Galatians on my way over here, and Galatians 2:20 says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So it's choosing to die. And I started to adopt that in my own practice of, God, I pray that Alan Smith would die so that Christ can live. I'm humbling and I'm saying I got to choose Christ because he did it for me and it's sufficient and he's loved me and I have to choose to die to myself. And maybe that's how we create that consistency, how you've built that, is you've just chosen to die to yourself every day.
Yeah, for what I want. It's so good. I mean, I'd always ask the question too. If I really got everything stripped away from me, would I still find joy?
Like Job.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because as men, we've got things we want to get accomplished. Because we want to follow what God has called us to do.
Yeah.
But I always ask that question: is like if he took it all away, would I still hit my knees and thank you, Lord?
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I that's you got to ask yourself that question.
That's great.
Like, as every single day, if my chiropractic clinic or I didn't have any legs and I couldn't squat anymore,
right?
Or I couldn't go run and play ball.
Yeah.
Like, would I still hit my knees and say, hey, I've died to you anyway, and so I just need you to live through me. Like, if I couldn't work out anymore because I was, like, these are the types of things that I think about, and that's where you've got to, in the morning, be in that kind of mindset, because with that kind of mindset, that's where grace comes in, and it's like, hey, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can today. Like, don't be lazy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you don't get exactly what you want, or if you mess up just a little bit, like, God's grace is, he's the ultimate Father. You just think, just wraps his arms around you, and it's good. It's good.
And what you do didn't change his love for you.
No.
Right?
I mean, which is crazy. It's like, hey, whether or not you were, you broke Emmitt Smith's rushing record or not, or you didn't make the NFL.
Yeah.
It's like, he still loves you. Whether or not I was an All-American in college or not, I beat myself up about that. I worked really hard for that. My parents drove me to wrestling. I let a lot of people down, but there's a reason why it is that God, puts us on the path that he has us on. And so it's good. It's good. Let me ask you this. So,
Yeah.
we talk, just kind of getting back a little bit to, the church and how do you think we do that better?
Yeah.
Like I just, I've spoken in churches, I've done certain things in churches. It's kind of very hit or miss, just kind of pop in, pop out kind of a thing. But, I think the church needs to be a safe place. It should be the place that we're talking about food and gluttony and like that's where the hard questions should be done. You know what I mean? Like when you think about the church, it's like, the two very awkward conversations that you would have at Christmas or Thanksgiving with your family are about vaccinations and about Jesus, right? Like you say those two things and it's like, whoop, 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 like pen drop.
Yeah.
So it's like those two, but what I'm saying is that's the church is where we should have those conversations. Whether or not you're uber healthy and you agree with what we're saying right now, we should still be able to come together in the church and be able to hash these out biblically.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be is like how do you think that we can improve the physical health of the church? Because if it really does impact us emotionally and spiritually, Luke 10:27, love your Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Right. So strength, physical health, emotional. How do we begin to do that? Because I get it, pastors and they're not health experts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are people from the outside that come in and try to kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah.
And so I'm a pastor and I'm trying to shepherd over my flock. And I've heard this before. It's like, well, I've got this person in my church that's Advocare. I've got this person in my church that's Amway. I've got this person in my church that's here. I can't have you come in, right? I can't do something like that because then I'm going to have all. Like, what is something that we can tangibly do? To improve that?
Yeah. That's a great question. And you kind of highlighted and mentioned like the church ought to be a safe place.
Yeah.
So how do we, of course, like meet people where they are? So the guy that is super overweight, unhealthy, on a ton of medications, how do we make this a space where like he feels welcome?
Can't be intimidated by the Jack Bro Bible study.
Right. And so how do we do that and then also promote health? Like we want to get this guy to health and do it lovingly, graciously, gently. Maybe, lovingly, graciously, and gently and do this. And so how do we practically do this? I guess I can speak a little bit from experience right now on a couple of things that I've done. I've recognized this great need is I started a fitness ministry at my church called Fit for the Kingdom, where we get together, 1 Timothy 4:8, right? Physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and the life to come. So, on a Saturday, and I haven't gotten to do this in a while, I want to get back to it, schedules, things change. How can we, maybe it's implementing something, hey, we're going to get together and we're going to train for godliness and we're going to also train our physical health. So maybe it's you get a workout group, use the church space, go to a state park, go to some, Hoover Dam, somewhere close, for us here. And so maybe it's leading that, we're getting fit and we know why. So it's a different thing. Another thing is you mentioned you speak at churches, you do things, and I got to speak at my church's men's retreat back in the fall, and I gave a message, talk about being a kingdom man and what it takes to be a kingdom man, all rooted in the Bible, right? Because it's lined out for us, and then took guys out to the woods and we challenged ourselves. We did hard things, right? We worked out. And so I think it's pushing that kind of like we have to take action. It's doing things. Maybe, hey, we could start this fitness ministry. We can work out together. We can hold each other accountable, right? Just like we do in like our godliness and like sin and things like I asked you like hold me accountable. Like you see me messing up, man. And so it's inviting that accountability into that even in the physical health because it's easier to do things together, right? So if we as a church body, as a local gathering, come together and say, hey, will you help hold me accountable? Will you, help me just eat better? Will you help me work out? And let's do this together. And that's what the church body is supposed to do these things together. So maybe it's grabbing, 1 or 2 guys, 3 guys, and then it just maybe starts to grow. And now you've created this opportunity where you're doing it together. So maybe it's practical things like that we can continue to promote.
Yeah, I think there's always, like, if you're a pastor and you're listening, there's somebody in your church who's passionate about fitness.
No doubt.
There's somebody in your church that's passionate about fitness that would love to start some type of a a health ministry in that way, because you and I both know that when you break somebody down physically, especially as a man, women and men are very different when it comes to Bible studies. Women, you have coffee, cookies, you'll talk about your life, we'll cry. Men, it's like, dude, I can I trust you?
Yeah.
Like, dude, we just did 100 burpees and okay, now I mean this dude can grind, right? So
like I'm about to die right now.
Right. I'll open up, right? Just the workout that Graham put us through, last weekend. I was like, dude, like there were some guys in there that were sucking air, and I may have not have really acknowledged or wanted to hang out with them, but I'm like, bro, like that dude has got some testicles,
like we just did this together, like you fought,
and so that guy can be in my foxhole kind of thing. So there's somebody there. I think that's a really good thing. Do you think, and this is I don't know, this might be a tough question. It may not be, but do you think that we need to maybe, as a church body, we're always trying to bring lost people in? Like it never should not be a goal of ours to go get one more, and I say that to our staff. It's like, listen, I'll never have a waiting list of new patients because I'll hire more doctors if I have to.
That's great.
Because we're on a mission to help more people. Yeah. Same thing with Warrior 3. I'm never going to have a waiting list to, talk to a guy who's struggling.
Right.
But do you think that maybe like the church has gone to this, like, let's try to get as many people to heaven as possible, instead of like taking the people that we have in the church and saying, hey, like there's some things that we got to work on here. Like you're missing some things. Like I'm worried about you. Like, because you just said, hey, hold me accountable.
Yeah.
Accountability versus went to church, did my thing Monday through Saturday, went to church again on Sunday. Like, do you think that maybe we might have to go a little deeper instead of maybe a little wider?
I could not be in more agreement. I'm sitting here like, this is my burden. This is my like a huge burden of mine. And I think, obviously being in ministry, aspiring to pastoral ministry is, why does the church exist? It's threefold. It's 1, to glorify God; 2, build up the saints; and 3, reach the lost. So we're always trying to reach the lost, but our first priority has got to be glorifying God.
Yeah.
Second priority is, who do we have? We have a people here that we have to build up.
Yeah.
So if we put that out of order, and this is God-given in the Bible, if we put that out of order where we say, reach the lost, glorify God, and then build up the saints, well, your people are going to start falling and slipping away. We're not doing a great job with who we have. So I think we are too focused on getting wide as opposed to taking here. Because this is the model, right? This is what Jesus did. He had his 3, he had his 12, and then what did he tell them to do? He said, he had his 12, he spent more time with his 3, and then he said, hey, go get them. Go get them. So we got to because if you get really deep here with the 3 or with the local body with these people, you're going to be better for the 10,000.
Yeah.
You're going to be better for the world. Yeah. So I think we've got it kind of backwards a little bit, where we're all about reach, and that's great. I'm not saying by any means don't do that. Don't go evangelize. No, like that's what we're told to do.
Absolutely.
It's one of my favorite things to do. But if I'm so focused on just trying to go get, and all the people that I've gotten are suffering because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do with them. So I think we kind of miss a little bit on, and I think it's actually almost a little bit disrespectful to say who I have right here isn't enough or isn't the right. So let me go get more. No. Who you got? Like if you got one, you better pour into that one, make one. I love 2 Timothy 2:2. In what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, and trust the faithful men who will be able to teach others also. In a short word, disciple to multiply. So if you take one, it's like a multiplication effect. And I was an economics major in college, right? You talk about compounding effects, right? In econ, like to a degree, right? And so it's just like, if I take my 1 and then they make 2, then it's like 4, and then they make 4, 6, 8. Like you've got by a couple generations and people, like, wow, you've spent not all your time, but like you've spent a significant amount of time pouring into this one, and all of a sudden you got 10,000 because you built that guy upright. So I think totally.
John Mark Comer, I love him.
Me too.
The book that he wrote, I just read it. I can't think of the name, but he's talking about being an apprentice for Jesus.
Practicing the Way.
Yeah,
I just finished it this week,
dude. Like totally just just smacked me right in the
Yeah.
face. You know what I mean? He also the ruthless elimination of hurry.
Yeah, that's
you know,
convicting,
and
isn't it?
just very convicting, right? So, two good reads if you're a dude who's just like Mach 6 with his hair on fire, kind of just going. John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and then Practicing the Way.
Yeah.
When I read the Practicing the Way, that really just made me slow down for a second and think, because in my profession in chiropractic or in health, it's very like there are very similar similarities to church ministry.
Yeah.
Like I talk to my pastor all the time. I was like, you're kind of dealing with the same thing that I'm dealing with. But I think what I've realized is that, and what I've told my staff is that we go like deeper, we don't go wider.
Yeah. It's good.
Because I know practitioners that are like all about new patients, right? So I have 100 new patients a month, and I'm like, wow, if you had 100 new patients a month, you'd be at like 10,000 a week right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of people that
Yeah.
are somehow falling through the cracks. And I'm
Right.
not saying it's not good to go
Yeah.
and to share the truth, but
Right.
at the same time, talking from a physical health standpoint, there are a lot of people in the church that are going. And man, what about that conversation of saying, look, dude, you are like, are you okay? Like you're 50 pounds overweight, you're on 10 different medications, you can barely breathe. Like, let's meet up. Like, can we fix this together?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that like it that's all about that. I'm saying it's gotta be somewhere about that, because if not, the person that you're asking to go is gonna die.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just
Like you're sending them out ill-equipped.
you know
like
what I
I-
mean? Like I
yeah.
almost kind of feel like the church needs a Navy SEAL Buds Week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not to beat them down to make them quit.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like there's got to be a little bit. I feel like we have gotten a little bit soft when it comes to all kinds of matters, like fire school. Like you can get through fire school pretty easy nowadays.
Yeah.
Police school, you can get through police school pretty easy
Yeah.
nowadays. There's all these, like, even getting to the Army and the Marines, it's like you don't have to do what you had to do in the past. I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow people to go through and do things, but there's almost got to be a little bit of a purification process.
No doubt.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those imperfections will begin to rise to the top, and I'll be able to kind of be better because of that process.
Right.
I just, the whole apprentice and just being built up and equipped and getting a little bit deeper instead of wider. I've heard it say, and a pastor friend of mine say, we're a battleship, not a cruise ship. I totally agree with that. And I use that in my office. Well, battleships have hard conversations.
Yeah.
Battleships do things that other people aren't. It ain't pretty.
Right.
It's about impact, not, making sure it's a battleship and not a cruise ship. A battleship is not afraid to say, listen, I haven't seen you, we're supposed to be working out. You've missed, 3 times, or, hey, I just noticed, dude, you're bringing in Chick-fil-A every day for lunch. Like, can we work on that?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I noticed that you're just, dude, you're having headaches. Like, what's going on? Like, we can't ignore those types of things.
Right.
If we're really about making impact for the kingdom in that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Good.
That's a word.
Any lasting thoughts that you want to share with the guys before we close it out?
Not too much, man. I think if you're listening, I just hope that was encouraging.
Sure.
And that we just see. I think there's the level of continuing to surrender, and continuing to fight at the same time. And the why. We talked pretty much at length about the why. The why is because God has loved us so much that He gave us this life, that He died for our sins because we don't deserve His salvation. We got separated, but He sent His Son to die in our place so that if we accept that, we can be in right relationship with Him. And it's the most loving thing ever. So it's that why, that foundation for everything else, meaning, hey, in my job, in my career, in my family, these are all opportunities to show love to God and love for others. Not to earn favor with Him, right? Because we can't earn favor, but to steward those things well, to show gratitude and appreciation for what He has already done for us. And that's what we want to get to do. We want to be more gratuitous to what God has given us with and gifted us with, so that we can serve others and live, lead, and love strong.
It's good, man. Like I think the question just came to mind is like, can people see Christ through your fitness and through your, like, how you look?
Yeah.
Can people see Christ in how it is that you lead your family or you lead your company? do people see Christ in how you love others and how you treat others?
Yeah.
I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
And just the entire Christ being the center of your live, the Christ being the center of why you lead, and Christ being the center of why you love. And don't be afraid of the word balance. I came into this conversation thinking, is it really about balance? But I think it's about, in order to be balanced, you have to be stable. And the only way that you can be stable is to have a foundation in Christ.
Amen.
But if we die early of our God-given potential, man, what a waste. Like that sucks. Like, I don't think that I mean, if you're a man out there and you're in ministry, I just personally want to say like we need you. Like we need your axe in the fight. And so if you're struggling and you need help, let us be a resource. Alan, how can people follow you, like Instagram? Like, how can people get involved and, maybe follow you or check you out?
Yeah, totally. On Instagram, Alan Smith 39, ALLEN Smith 39. I also do training over actually new spot starting in the new year. It's at the Yoga Factory in Westerville over at Life Giving Church. I've grown a lot there, and so in those, you follow me. I like to post on there. I've been posting a little bit more, try to encourage guys, and so just pretty much update things on my Instagram there.
You're doing some good stuff there, man. I love your posts. So make sure you guys go follow Alan. If you're local in the Columbus community and you want someone to kick your butt and give you the gospel while he does it, Alan will hook you up. But if you guys are out there, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you guys are just struggling in how you live, how you lead, and how you love, go to warrior3project.com. Make sure you get involved with our newsletter. If you're local here in Columbus, we're doing what we call WAD in the Word, right? So every month we got a guest speaker come in. We just had 6-time games athlete Graham Holmberg come to our farm. We do a workout and we just dive into the Word. We get after it together. All kinds of amazing ways you guys can get plugged in: Instagram, Facebook. We've also got a 40-day challenge, right? So hey, beginning of the year, it's like, hey, I just really need something to really put some guardrails in my life. Like, I'm struggling with my fitness. I'm struggling with my faith. Like, I don't even know what it means to open a Bible. Like, I've got 6-pack abs, but I have no faith. Like we want to help you with that. You go to warrior3project.com and purchase the Warrior 40 Challenge. So Jesus went 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. So this is kind of like that refining preparation process so we can live, lead, and love strong. So, hey, until next episode, Alan and myself, we pray that you live, lead, and love strong today. See you, gentlemen.